This is a place where nuclear arsenals sit beside grazing cattle, where a canyon deep enough to swallow a city, where ancient cultures, deadly disasters, and unbelievable mysteries have been hiding for thousands of years. Texas Panhandle looks empty from the highway, but appearances can be dangerously deceiving. These are 35 scary facts that reveal what the Texas Panhandle has been hiding. 35. The giant scar hidden beneath the Texas plains. The Texas Panhandle has spent generations convincing people it's nothing more than endless flat prairie. That's exactly what makes its biggest secret so shocking. Just outside the town of Canyon, the Earth suddenly breaks apart into Palo Duro Canyon, the second largest canyon system in the United States. Stretching nearly 120 miles long, reaching up to 20 miles wide, and dropping almost 1,000 feet, this enormous chasm was carved over millions of years by the Prairie Dog Town fork of the Red River. Its towering crimson walls have sheltered Native American tribes, challenged explorers, and trapped travelers who underestimated its unforgiving terrain. Sudden flash floods can transform dry creek beds into raging torrents within minutes, while the relentless Texas heat has pushed even experienced hikers to their limits. Standing on the canyon's rim, it's difficult to believe something this immense could remain hidden in a place everyone calls flat. Yet millions pass nearby every year, never realizing one of America's greatest natural wonders is waiting just beyond the horizon. 34. The invisible resource that quietly changed the world. Nothing about the Texas Panhandle suggests it once held one of the world's most valuable resources. There are no glittering mines or towering oil rigs to hint at what lies beneath the ground. Yet in 1918, drillers near Amarillo and Pampa discovered natural gas containing extraordinary amounts of helium, a rare element that would become essential to modern life. By 1929, the federal government had opened a major helium plant in Amarillo, and for decades the Panhandle supplied nearly all of the world's helium. This invisible gas became critical for hospital MRI machines, scientific laboratories, rocket launches, advanced manufacturing, and countless technologies most people use without a second thought. Deep beneath the quiet cattle country, the government even created a massive strategic helium reserve to protect the nation's future supply. While travelers saw nothing but empty fields above, an invisible treasure below their feet was quietly helping shape the modern world. And almost nobody knew it was there. 33. Texas built its greatest landmark with empty land. Most people assume the Texas state capitol was paid for with tax dollars. The truth is far stranger. In 1882, Texas desperately wanted a grand new capitol building, but didn't have the money to build it. Instead, state leaders traded more than 3 million acres of Panhandle land to a group of Chicago investors in exchange for constructing the massive pink granite capitol that still stands in Austin today. That enormous tract became the legendary XIT Ranch, stretching nearly 200 miles from north to south and surrounded by more than 6,000 miles of fencing. The land covered an area larger than the entire state of Connecticut, making it one of the largest ranches ever assembled. What many dismissed as worthless prairie helped build one of Texas's greatest symbols of government, proving the Panhandle was far more valuable than anyone imagined. But the next fact reveals something even more unexpected. A cowboy town where people from around the world quietly built a new home. 32. The cowboy town that quietly welcomed the world. Most people picture the Texas Panhandle as a place where everyone shares the same roots and traditions. Amarillo tells a very different story. Beginning in the 1970s, families escaping war, persecution, and political violence arrived from countries including Myanmar, Somalia, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Cuba, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Many found work in the region's meatpacking industry, rebuilding their lives in one of the last places anyone would expect. Today, dozens of languages are spoken throughout Amarillo's schools, neighborhoods, and churches, creating one of the most diverse communities in Texas. Behind every language is a story of survival, sacrifice, and hope, carried across continents before reaching the high plains. What appears to be an ordinary cowboy city has quietly become a crossroads of cultures hidden in plain sight. Yet long before these families arrived, another powerful nation ruled these plains, and its collapse changed Texas forever. 31. The morning an empire disappeared. For more than 200 years, the Comanche ruled the southern plains with unmatched skill, stopping armies and controlling vast stretches of territory across what is now Texas. Most people imagine an empire like that ending in one enormous bloody battle. It didn't. Before sunrise on September 28, 1874, Colonel Ranald Mackenzie secretly guided U.S. cavalry down a hidden trail into Palo Duro Canyon, surprising a sleeping Comanche, Kiowa, and Cheyenne camp. Very few people were killed, but the attack struck where it hurt most. Soldiers burned food stores, destroyed shelters, and captured nearly 1,400 horses before shooting them. Facing winter without transportation, hunting animals, or supplies, the remaining free Comanche bands had little chance of survival and surrendered within months. An empire that had resisted for generations collapsed in a single morning. But the next story reaches much farther back in time, to a mysterious trade network that existed nearly 13,000 years before Texas even had a name. 30. The ancient stone that connected a forgotten world. Long before cowboys, railroads, or even written history reached the Texas Panhandle, another civilization left behind clues that still puzzle archaeologists today. Along the Canadian River lies the Alabates Flint Quarries, where people began mining brilliantly colored stone more than 13,000 years ago. This wasn't ordinary rock. The distinctive flint was prized for making razor-sharp spear points and tools, and archaeologists have discovered it hundreds, even thousands of miles from its source. Some pieces traveled nearly 1,500 miles, revealing an enormous trade network stretching across North America long before roads, horses, or wagons existed. Early hunters used these weapons while pursuing mammoths that once roamed the high plains, surviving in a landscape both harsh and unforgiving. Every piece of flint tells the story of people who crossed dangerous wilderness in search of survival. Yet the next secret isn't buried underground at all. It's 10 old Cadillacs standing nose first in the Texas dirt for a reason almost nobody understands. We're only partway through this journey, and the biggest discoveries are still ahead. If exploring America's hidden history is your kind of adventure, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. All right, let's keep going. 29. The cars buried like a forgotten warning. Imagine driving across the empty Texas Panhandle and suddenly spotting 10 classic Cadillacs buried nose first in the ground, their tail fins reaching toward the sky like rusted monuments. It looks almost apocalyptic, as if something terrible forced them underground. But this bizarre landmark was no accident. In 1974, an avant-garde art collective called Ant Farm, backed by Amarillo businessman Stanley Marsh III, intentionally buried the Cadillacs to celebrate the evolution of America's most famous luxury car. The vehicles, built between 1949 and 1963, were planted at an angle said to match the Great Pyramid of Giza. Visitors are encouraged to cover them with spray paint, meaning the installation changes appearance almost every day. What began as an unusual art experiment has become one of Texas's most photographed landmarks, leaving travelers wondering what they're really looking at. But the next secret isn't standing above the ground. It's an enormous underground ocean that's quietly disappearing beneath the Panhandle itself. 28. The underground ocean that's slowly vanishing. Beneath the quiet farms and endless cattle pastures of the Texas Panhandle lies one of the greatest hidden resources in North America. It's called the Ogallala Aquifer, a massive underground reservoir that supplies water to farms, ranches, and communities across the Great Plains. Most people assume groundwater naturally replaces itself after every rainfall. Here, that assumption can be dangerously wrong. Much of the Panhandle's water is ancient, deposited millions of years ago by runoff from the Rocky Mountains, and it is being pumped out far faster than nature can restore it. In some areas, water levels have fallen dramatically, raising concerns about the future of agriculture that feeds millions of Americans. Above ground, everything appears calm and ordinary. Below the surface, an invisible countdown has already begun. But the next story isn't about disappearing water. It's about one remarkable cowboy whose legacy helped build an entire community that history almost forgot. 27. The cowboy who built a legacy history nearly erased. When people picture the Old West, they rarely imagine a black cowboy helping shape one of the Texas Panhandle's most important communities. Yet that's exactly what Matthew Bones Hooks did. Born in 1867 to formerly enslaved parents, Hooks learned to ride and work cattle as a young boy. earning a reputation as one of the finest horsebreakers in the region. But his greatest achievement came after he settled in Amarillo around 1900. At a time when segregation and discrimination defined everyday life, Hooks helped establish the city's first black church, supported its first black school, built a community center, and played a key role in developing the North Heights neighborhood. His determination created opportunities that lasted long after his lifetime, though his name nearly disappeared from history. The next secret isn't about one extraordinary man. It's about a towering wall of rock that most travelers never realize they're driving beside. 26. The 1,000-foot wall hiding across the plains. Everyone calls the Texas Panhandle flat, but that illusion ends the moment you reach the Caprock Escarpment. Rising as much as 1,000 feet in places and stretching nearly 200 miles across the region, this enormous wall of rock divides the high plains from the rolling country below. Early Spanish explorers described it as a natural fortress standing across the landscape, and it's easy to understand why. The hardened caprock resisted erosion while softer layers slowly disappeared, creating dramatic cliffs that still dominate the horizon today. Rivers carved through this barrier over countless centuries, eventually creating Palo Duro Canyon and other hidden landscapes below. For early travelers crossing the plains, reaching the escarpment meant facing steep descents, difficult routes, and an unforgiving wilderness where one wrong decision could become deadly. Even today, countless motorists unknowingly pass near this geological giant without realizing it's there. Coming up next is a fact proves the Panhandle's strangest surprise isn't a canyon or a cliff. It's a town whose unforgettable name was born from one embarrassing misunderstanding. 25. The town accidentally named after buffalo dung. Some town names honor heroes, others celebrate rivers, mountains, or presidents. The oldest town in the Texas Panhandle owes its name to a misunderstanding that has survived for more than a century. In the 1870s, settlers preparing to establish a post office wanted to name their growing community after a nearby creek. According to local tradition, they asked a Comanche speaker for the word they believed meant Sweetwater. The answer they received was Mobeetie. The name was officially approved only for settlers to later discover the word actually translated to buffalo dung. Embarrassing or not, the name remained. Mobeetie soon became the first major center of government in the Panhandle before a devastating tornado and the arrival of the railroad slowly drained its importance. Today, only a small community remains, preserving one of Texas's strangest historical accidents. But the next fact takes us even farther back, to an expedition searching for unimaginable riches that found something far more dangerous instead. 24. The expedition that wandered into an endless wilderness. Nearly 80 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, Spanish explorer Francisco Vázquez de Coronado marched across the Texas Panhandle chasing one of history's greatest myths, the legendary cities of gold. Instead of glittering treasure, his exhausted expedition found an endless ocean of grass stretching beyond the horizon. The plains were so vast and featureless that some accounts suggest his men drove stakes into the ground simply to avoid becoming hopelessly lost. Every direction looked exactly the same, turning the landscape itself into an invisible maze. Coronado's guide had promised unimaginable wealth, but the expedition uncovered only isolation, exhaustion, and crushing disappointment. The search ended in failure, and the dream of finding a golden empire vanished with it. Yet Coronado unknowingly became one of the first Europeans to record this mysterious landscape, leaving behind descriptions of a place that seemed almost impossible to cross. The next story reveals what happened when nature itself turned against the people who believed they had finally conquered these unforgiving plains. 23. The day the sun simply disappeared. The people of the Texas Panhandle thought April 14, 1935 would be like any other spring afternoon. The skies were clear, the air was warm, and families were outside enjoying Palm Sunday. Then someone looked toward the horizon and saw what appeared to be a solid black wall racing across the plains. Within minutes, a dust cloud rising nearly 1,000 feet into the air swallowed everything in its path. Daylight vanished so completely that people couldn't see their own hands in front of their faces. The storm became known as Black Sunday, the most infamous dust storm of the Dust Bowl. Crops disappeared, Livestock suffocated and terrified families sealed themselves inside their homes, hoping the darkness would finally pass. That single storm became the symbol of an environmental disaster that changed America forever. While nature nearly destroyed the Panhandle, the next story reveals how one tiny town rebuilt itself with people arriving from nearly every corner of the world. 22. The tiny Texas town rebuilt by 4 continents. At first glance, Cactus, Texas looks like another quiet Panhandle town where little ever changes. But behind its modest streets lies one of the most remarkable stories of survival and renewal in America. For decades, its massive beef processing plant has attracted families fleeing war, poverty, and persecution from Vietnam, Laos, Mexico, Guatemala, Somalia, and Myanmar. Many arrived with little more than hope, determined to rebuild lives that conflict had nearly destroyed. Today, a town of only a few thousand residents speaks dozens of languages and reflects cultures from 4 different continents. In 2006, a massive federal immigration raid suddenly removed hundreds of workers, leaving neighborhoods almost empty overnight and changing the town forever. Yet Cactus endured once again, continuing to welcome newcomers searching for a safer future. What appears to be an ordinary cattle town has quietly become one of America's most extraordinary communities. But the next mystery reaches back centuries, to a civilization that built permanent stone homes before vanishing without leaving a written explanation behind. 21. The stone builders who vanished without a trace. Long before cowboys, railroads, or Spanish explorers crossed the Texas Panhandle, another people built something no one expected to find on the open plains. Along the Canadian River, the Antelope Creek culture constructed permanent stone homes with multiple rooms, thick masonry walls, and carefully planned villages. They farmed corn and beans, hunted massive bison herds, and traded valuable goods across hundreds of miles, creating a thriving civilization in a landscape most people consider too harsh to support one. Then, sometime around the mid-1400s, they simply disappeared. Archaeologists believe drought, conflict, or changing conditions may have forced them away, but no one knows for certain. Their abandoned homes slowly crumbled into silence, leaving behind one of the Panhandle's greatest unsolved mysteries. Today, only scattered ruins remain where families once lived, worked, and disappeared into history. The next story shatters another Wild West myth, proving even America's toughest cowboys once walked off the job together. 20. When the toughest cowboys in Texas went on strike. The cowboy has long been remembered as the ultimate symbol of independence, a man who answered to no one and survived by his own grit. But the Texas Panhandle tells a different story. In 1883, hundreds of working cowboys grew tired of shrinking pay and disappearing benefits as enormous corporate ranches began replacing the open range. Instead of reaching for their revolvers, nearly 330 cowboys organized one of the largest labor strikes in frontier history. They demanded fixed monthly wages and fair treatment, then walked away from some of the biggest ranches in the Panhandle. Newspapers across the country reported rumors of violence, burning fences, and armed conflict, but those stories were false. The strike remained remarkably peaceful before eventually collapsing as changing economics and harsh winters weakened the movement. Even legends sometimes answer to survival instead of pride. But the next secret isn't about people at all. It's about thousands of disappearing lakes quietly keeping the Texas Panhandle alive beneath the surface. 19. The 19,000 vanishing lakes, keeping the Panhandle alive. Scattered across the Texas Panhandle are nearly 19,000 shallow lakes that appear after heavy rains, only to vanish beneath the blazing sun weeks later. Most travelers never notice them, and even many Texans have no idea they exist. These temporary basins, known as playa lakes, may look insignificant, but they quietly perform one of the most important jobs on the high plains. As rainwater collects inside them, it slowly seeps through cracks in the clay, helping recharge the Ogallala aquifer buried far below. Without these disappearing lakes, the Panhandle's most valuable water supply would receive very little natural replenishment. They also provide a vital resting place for thousands of migrating ducks, geese, and endangered whooping cranes crossing North America. These silent pools appear, disappear, and return year after year, keeping life alive where survival depends on every drop of water. Next is a story that proves the Panhandle's strangest celebrations happen in a tiny town where thousands gather each year for an unexpected piece of Ireland. 18. The tiny Texas town that becomes Ireland every spring. Driving through Shamrock, Texas, you would never expect this quiet Panhandle town of about 2,000 residents to become the center of one of America's largest St. Patrick's Day celebrations. Yet every March, more than 10,000 visitors flood its streets, transforming the peaceful community into a sea of green. The town was named in 1890 by Irish immigrant George Nichol, who chose the Shamrock as a tribute to his family's heritage and good fortune. Today, genuine Irish traditions fill the streets with music, dancing, and visitors who travel from Ireland itself to join the celebration. Hidden among the festivities is a genuine piece of the Blarney Stone, while the famous U Drop Inn, a beautifully preserved Route 66 landmark, helped inspire a building in Pixar's Cars. What appears to be an ordinary prairie town briefly becomes one of the most Irish places in America. Coming up, the next fact tells the remarkable story of a defeated warrior who became even more powerful after laying down his weapons. 17. The warrior who became more powerful after defeat. History usually remembers defeated leaders as forgotten men whose influence vanished with the final battle. Quanah Parker proved history wrong. Born to Comanche, Chief Pettinacona and Cynthia Ann Parker, a white girl captured and raised by the Comanche, Quanah grew into the last great leader of the Quahati Band. He refused to surrender while his people still had buffalo to hunt and horses to ride. Only after the destruction of their food supply and way of life did he lead his followers onto a reservation in 1875. Most expected his story to end there. Instead, it was only beginning. Quanah became a respected rancher, successful businessman, political leader, and trusted advisor who met with presidents and negotiated on behalf of his people. The warrior who refused to bow in battle ultimately gained more influence in peace than many who defeated him ever achieved. But the next fact reveals how one of America's greatest Western stories was inspired by a dangerous journey that actually happened in the Texas Panhandle. 16. The deadly cattle drive that inspired an American legend. Millions of people know Lonesome Dove as one of the greatest Western stories ever written. Few realize its most unforgettable moments were inspired by real events that unfolded across the Texas Panhandle. In 1866, legendary cattlemen Charles Goodnight and Oliver Loving opened a trail through country filled with danger, hostile conditions, and almost no reliable water. Their journey pushed both men beyond their limits. During one drive, Loving was seriously wounded and struggled more than 100 miles seeking help before dying from his injuries. Goodnight honored a promise to carry his friend's body home to Texas, a heartbreaking act that later inspired Larry McMurtry's famous novel. Goodnight's innovations didn't end there. He also designed the first practical chuck wagon, forever changing life on cattle drives across the American West. Behind one of history's greatest Western adventures stood a true story of courage, friendship, sacrifice, and survival. The next mystery isn't about a legendary trail, it's about a city that has been saying its own name incorrectly for more than a century. 15. The Texas city that pronounces its own name wrong. Ask almost anyone in Texas how to pronounce Amarillo, and you'll probably hear the same answer. The strange part is that answer isn't the original one. The city's name comes from the Spanish word for yellow, inspired by the golden wildflowers and yellow soil found along a nearby creek. Spanish speakers pronounced it the traditional way, but when the railroad arrived during the 1880s, conductors announcing station stops couldn't pronounce the Spanish double L. Their Americanized version quickly spread, and before long, nearly everyone was saying the city's name differently than its founders intended. More than 130 years later, the altered pronunciation remains the local standard, even though its Spanish roots tell a different story. One small railroad habit permanently changed the identity of an entire city. But the next fact proves the Panhandle can be even more surprising, because the coldest temperature ever recorded in Texas wasn't in the mountains. It happened out on these lonely plains. 14. The coldest place in Texas isn't where you think. When people imagine the coldest place in Texas, they usually picture snow-covered mountains in the far west. The truth lies hundreds of miles away on the wide-open plains of the Panhandle. On February 12, 1899, the town of Tulia recorded an astonishing 23 degrees below zero, the coldest official temperature ever measured in Texas. With nothing to block the powerful Arctic air sweeping across the high plains, the landscape became brutally unforgiving. Livestock froze where they stood, water supplies turned solid, and families fought simply to survive the relentless cold. Even today, many Texans are surprised to learn the state's cold weather record belongs to a region better known for scorching summers than frozen mornings. Nature has always reminded the Panhandle that survival depends on respecting its extremes. For the following story leaves weather behind and uncovers an unexpected European community that quietly preserved its traditions in the middle of cowboy country for more than a century. 13. The German village hidden in cowboy country. If someone asked you where to find one of Texas's oldest German Catholic communities, you'd probably point toward the hill country. Almost nobody would guess the answer is hidden deep in the Texas Panhandle. In 1902, Father Joseph Reisdorf founded the town of Nazareth, hoping to build a close-knit farming community where German Catholic families could preserve their faith, language, and traditions. Through harsh winters, relentless droughts, and the devastation of the Dust Bowl, the small settlement refused to disappear. At one point, the population nearly vanished, yet the community endured while surrounding towns struggled to survive. Even today, Nazareth remains one of the Panhandle's most remarkable hidden communities, quietly preserving a way of life more than a century old. Surrounded by ranches and endless prairie, it feels like a forgotten piece of Europe that somehow escaped the passage of time. But the next fact reveals how one invasive plant nearly drained an entire lake and threatened the water supply of thousands of Texans. 12. The plant that nearly drank an entire lake. Most people blame drought whenever a lake begins to disappear. In the Texas Panhandle, the truth proved far more disturbing. Lake Meredith, once the primary water source for Amarillo, Lubbock, and several surrounding communities, nearly collapsed after decades of falling water levels. While dry weather certainly played a role, another silent enemy was spreading along the Canadian River. An invasive tree known as salt cedar had taken root across the watershed, consuming enormous amounts of water before it could ever reach the lake. A single acre of these thirsty trees can absorb several acre-feet of water every year, slowly starving rivers that communities depend upon for survival. By 2013, Lake Meredith had fallen to its lowest recorded level, forcing officials to stop delivering water altogether. Crews eventually began removing thousands of acres of salt cedar, helping the lake slowly recover. The next story isn't about survival in nature. It's about a restaurant where thousands of people willingly challenge one of America's most intimidating meals. 11. The steak challenge that defeats almost everyone. Deep in the Texas Panhandle, thousands of confident visitors walk into a restaurant believing they'll leave with a free meal. Most never do. At the Big Texan Steak Ranch in Amarillo, challengers have exactly 1 hour to finish a 72-ounce steak, a baked potato, shrimp cocktail, salad, and bread roll while sitting on a raised stage for everyone to watch. Standing up, quitting, or running out of time means paying for the entire feast. Since the challenge began in the 1960s, more than 90,000 people have accepted it, yet only a small percentage have succeeded. The pressure isn't just physical, it's psychological. Every bite becomes harder as a crowd waits to see whether determination or defeat comes first. What looks like harmless roadside fun has humbled competitors from around the world. But the next story proves the Panhandle hides something even stranger, a church whose beautiful artwork was created by prisoners of war during World War II. 10. The church painted by the enemy. During World War II, thousands of Italian prisoners of war were held in camps across the United States. Few people realize one of the largest camps stood quietly in the Texas Panhandle, just outside the town of Hereford. Among those prisoners were talented artists whose lives took an unexpected turn. A local Catholic priest arranged for several of them to decorate St. Mary's Church in the nearby German community of Umbarger. In exchange for better food, the prisoners painted beautiful religious murals, carved intricate woodwork, and created artwork that still fills the church today. Some local residents even posed as models for the angels appearing in the paintings. Decades after the war ended and the prisoners returned home, their work remained behind as a lasting reminder that beauty can emerge from even the darkest moments in history. Coming up, The next fact reveals how one of the wildest towns in the Old West wasn't destroyed by gunfighters. It quietly died because a railroad chose a different path. 9. The Wild West town the railroad quietly killed. Most ghost towns die in a blaze of violence, destroyed by gunfights, fires, or lawlessness. Tascosa, Texas, met a far stranger fate. During the late 1800s, it was one of the roughest cattle towns in the Texas Panhandle, filled with saloons, gamblers, cowboys, and outlaws. Even Billy the Kid is believed to have spent time nearby, while legendary lawmen passed through its dusty streets. Everything suggested Tascosa would become one of the great towns of the American West. Instead, its future was decided inside a railroad office. When the tracks were routed about 15 miles south, businesses, settlers, and opportunity followed the trains to what would become Amarillo. Tascosa slowly emptied until little remained but abandoned buildings and weathered memories. No final shootout ended the town, only silence. But the next fact reveals that even the shape of the Texas Panhandle was created by one of America's most bitter political battles. 8. The borders drawn by America's darkest argument. The Texas Panhandle looks almost unnaturally perfect on a map. Its straight borders cutting across the landscape with almost no regard for rivers, mountains, or geography. That isn't a coincidence. Those lines were drawn by politicians, not nature. Long before settlers arrived, debates over slavery helped shape the Panhandle we know today. The Missouri Compromise established the famous 3630 line separating future free and slave territories, while the Compromise of 1850 finalized Texas' western boundary after the Mexican-American War. Together, those political decisions created the nearly perfect rectangle that still defines the Panhandle today. Every straight edge tells the story of fierce national arguments that pushed the United States closer to the Civil War. What appears to be an ordinary border is actually a lasting reminder of one of the country's deepest divisions. The next story proves one determined woman saved a bloodline that had almost disappeared from the face of the earth forever. 7. The woman who saved a species from extinction. By the late 1870s, the Great Southern Plains bison were disappearing at a terrifying pace. Millions had once thundered across the Texas Panhandle, but relentless commercial hunting reduced them to only a handful of survivors. Most people believed their fate had already been sealed. One woman refused to accept that. Mary Ann Goodnight, wife of legendary rancher Charles Goodnight, convinced her husband to rescue several orphaned buffalo calves whose mothers had been slaughtered by hide hunters. Those few frightened animals became the foundation of a protected herd, unlike any other in North America. More than a century later, scientists discovered the descendants carried unique Southern Plains bison genetics that had vanished everywhere else. Without one compassionate decision, an entire bloodline would have disappeared forever. Today, that herd still survives at Caprock Canyons State Park, quietly reminding visitors how close Texas came to losing an irreplaceable piece of its natural history. Coming up, the next story reveals how one of America's greatest musicians found his voice while living through one of the darkest disasters the Panhandle had ever endured. 6. The dust storm that changed American music forever. Most people remember Woody Guthrie as the voice of Oklahoma and the Great Depression. Few realize that some of his most powerful inspiration came from the Texas Panhandle. During the 1930s, Guthrie lived in Pampa, where he witnessed the Dust Bowl at its terrifying worst. He watched towering walls of black dust swallow the sky, bury homes beneath drifting soil, choke livestock, and force desperate families to abandon everything they owned in search of survival. Those unforgettable scenes became the emotional foundation for the songs that would later define an era, including "This Land Is Your Land." The Panhandle didn't simply shape Guthrie's music, it transformed an ordinary young man into one of America's most influential folk singers. Out of fear, loss, and hardship came songs that gave hope to millions. The next fact proves the Panhandle still puts on an unforgettable show every summer, inside the very canyon where an empire once came to an end. 5. The outdoor show performed where an empire fell. Most theaters are built in busy cities beneath bright lights. One of America's most remarkable stages is hidden inside a canyon where history once turned deadly. Deep within Palo Duro Canyon, a towering 600-foot cliff serves as the backdrop for Texas, an outdoor musical that has entertained audiences nearly every summer since 1966. More than 60 performers, live horses, fireworks, and music bring the story of the Panhandle's early settlers to life beneath the stars. Yet long before applause echoed through the canyon, these same cliffs witnessed the collapse of the Comanche Empire after Colonel Ranald Mackenzie's surprise attack in 1874. The contrast is almost haunting. A place once filled with fear, survival, and loss now welcomes thousands seeking entertainment. As darkness settles over the canyon, it's impossible not to wonder what memories still linger among the ancient red walls. But the next fact reveals a ranch that has survived wars, droughts, and disasters without ever abandoning the canyon where it all began. 4. The ranch that refused to die. Most ranches eventually disappear, divided by generations, sold to new owners, or abandoned when hard times arrive. The J.A. Ranch ignored those odds. In 1876, legendary cattleman Charles Goodnight and Irish investor John Adair established what became the first permanent ranch in the Texas Panhandle, deep inside the protective walls of Palo Duro Canyon. At its peak, the ranch covered more than 1 million acres and managed over 100,000 head of cattle across one of the harshest landscapes in Texas. It survived the brutal winters of the open range era, devastating droughts, the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, and 2 world wars without abandoning the land that built its reputation. Nearly a century and a half later, descendants of the original partnership still operate the ranch, making it one of the oldest continuously operating ranches in the region. The next fact reveals why millions of Americans have unknowingly depended on the Texas Panhandle every time they sat down to enjoy a hamburger or steak. 3. The place that quietly feeds America. Most people picture America's beef industry spread evenly across endless ranches from coast to coast. The truth is far more surprising. Within roughly 200 miles of Amarillo, more cattle are finished for beef than anywhere else on Earth. This single region of the Texas Panhandle produces nearly 42% of all the fed beef in the United States, supplying restaurants, grocery stores, and dinner tables across the nation. The combination of wide-open land, abundant grain, dry air, and access to the Ogallala Aquifer created conditions unlike almost anywhere else. Millions of cattle pass through enormous feedlots that many travelers never notice from nearby highways. Every hamburger, steak, or brisket could have begun its final journey here. The Panhandle may look empty, but it quietly helps feed an entire country. Feeding America isn't its only responsibility. The next fact reveals the most dangerous place in Texas, a facility hidden among cattle fields that helps protect the entire nation. 2. The most dangerous place in America hides behind a barbed wire fence. From the highway, it looks almost ordinary. Cattle graze peacefully across the high plains, wheat fields stretch toward the horizon, and nothing suggests you're passing one of the most heavily guarded places in the United States. Just northeast of Amarillo sits Pantex, the nation's only facility responsible for assembling, disassembling, and maintaining America's nuclear weapons. During the Cold War, tens of thousands of nuclear warheads passed through this isolated complex. Today, retired weapons and plutonium components remain stored inside heavily protected earth-covered bunkers, making it one of the most strategically important sites in the country. Despite its enormous responsibility, most Americans have never heard of it. Travelers drive by every day without realizing one of the world's most powerful arsenals lies only a short distance away. The quiet landscape hides an extraordinary burden. Even nuclear weapons aren't the Panhandle's greatest secret. The final fact reveals why this overlooked corner of Texas may be one of the most important places in America. 1. The forgotten corner of Texas that quietly holds up America. From the air, the Texas Panhandle looks almost empty, a flat rectangle of prairie that most travelers cross without a second thought. That's the greatest illusion of all. This overlooked region quietly supports America in ways few people ever realize. Beneath its soil lies one of the nation's most valuable water supplies. Its ranches and feedlots help produce nearly half of America's fed beef. For decades, its underground reserves supplied most of the world's helium, while its isolated plains became home to the only facility that assembles and maintains the nation's nuclear weapons. Hidden within its borders are ancient trade routes, towering canyons, forgotten civilizations, and stories of survival stretching back more than 13,000 years. What appears to be empty land has quietly shaped the nation's history, economy, security, and future. The Texas Panhandle isn't flyover country. It may be one of the most important landscapes in America, hiding extraordinary secrets in plain sight. Which fact surprised you the most? And if you think the Texas Panhandle was fascinating, wait until you discover what's hiding in America's next forgotten landscape. The Texas Panhandle may look empty on a map, but now you know it hides some of America's biggest secrets. Which fact surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments. And if you think this forgotten landscape was unbelievable, just wait until you see what we've uncovered in another overlooked corner of America. The next mystery is even harder to believe. If you enjoyed discovering America's forgotten places, hit like and subscribe because there are hundreds more waiting to be uncovered. Now let's keep digging into the next video.